Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is the first of what I hope is going to be many podcast meetings with myself and John Cummings. We are going to be doing a little podcast to talk about local politics and state politics, and thus we have called it Palmetto Politics. Those of you who are new to the state of South Carolina, the Palmetto is sort of our state flag, our state tree, if you will. A little bit of history on that, but we won't get into that. We're just going to get started right away, kind of with a little bit of an introduction. So, John, if you'll go first, we'll kind of let folks know who you are, and then I'll tag back in and give a little bit about myself. So, John, where are you from, and what brings you to the beautiful state of South Carolina and Horry County in particular?
Well, that could take up the whole hour, but I'll make sure I don't do that. I'm born and raised in the Bronx in New York City. Grew up in an average. My dad was a police officer, so we weren't swimming and running or anything. And make a long story short, I went on the New York City Police Department in 1983, was injured in the line of duty, had to retire in 1991. So you think that, you have it all figured out. God has a plan. And we don't get to see the plan. So I went back to college, finished up, got into broadcasting locally, did sports up in the New York, Connecticut area for 28 years. But during that, I ended up going back to my high school to teach history and government at St. Raymond. It's a boys' high school, like I said, where I went in the neighborhood. And I was there 22 years. And the last several years, the students were after me for a long time. Hey, Mr. Cummings, you need to run for office. You're wasting your time with us. And I said, I'm not wasting my time with you. You guys need to know about the Constitution. But anyway, finally, I decided to jump in. And nothing like jumping in at the top. So I ran in against Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, AOC.
The devil.
In 2020. And I could really write a book about that.
I'm sure.
Because of everything that happened, running for office during a COVID lockdown, which I could write several chapters just about that. So I ended up getting about almost 60,000 votes.
That's pretty good considering.
Well, yeah, there's only 35,000 registered Republicans in the district.
Yeah, makes it tough. So you got some Democrats to cross over or independents.
And a lot of independents. And you're figuring that all the Republicans that vote,
right?
You're not getting 100%, you're probably getting 50. So we got almost 60,000 votes. And as far as South Carolina is concerned, my wife and I had bought a place down here in 18, thinking we were going to retire down here years from now.
Right.
But during the campaign, I thought I had worked out a leave of absence with my principal and the union. And the principal and the union were okay with a 30-day leave of absence starting October 1st, take me through really till Veterans Day so I could take a break after the campaign. But the Archdiocese of New York said, no, contractually, there are no leave of absences. No such thing.
Wow.
And I only wanted 30 days, and I was without pay. And I had been there 22 years, and I went to the school. And if you know anything about Catholic school, you make about half what you make in public school.
Yeah.
So it's not,
I understand.
So I had to resign. There was no way I could start campaigning at 3:15 in the afternoon. Mm-hmm. And it was also because of the lockdowns. There was no way I could be ready for class the next day if I was going to campaign after school.
Sure, of course.
It was twice the work. Teaching hybrid was twice the work.
That's what I've heard.
And it wasn't fair to the people that supported me in the campaign that I was going to campaign from 3:15 till 9, 10, whatever.
Right.
So I had to resign from my job. So I lost my job. My wife was also a teacher at the school. She has some medical issues. And I didn't know how much longer she could teach. So I said, look, finish up the year if you can, and let's go. So I moved down here in February of 2021.
Right.
And my wife came down in June when she finished school. And we've been here ever since. And I've been around the political process and scene since I got here, observing.
Right. Well, John, what did you teach at the high school? What were the courses that you taught?
Oh boy, I taught mostly U.S. history. Mm-hmm. I designed the AP U.S. history class for the school. That sounds
so familiar.
Yeah, and I taught government. I taught some economics, sociology, gym. Sometimes in school, teachers will leave in the middle of the year, and you got to wear a lot of hats.
Indeed.
So But
Indeed.
it was, and it really, I always had a great interest in politics. So teaching government, and I had a minor in political science, and I was really into it anyway. But I guess the best part of teaching there was that I got so many young men engaged in the process.
Right. Now you were at an all-male, all-boys school, correct?
All boys,
Yeah.
high school,
A lot of
80
testosterone floating around.
88%, yeah, 88% minority population.
Wow.
40% of our kids lived in the poorest congressional district in the United States, the old
Right.
New York 15,
Gotcha.
which was Richie Torres's
Yeah.
district, and 56% single parent family, and we graduated 99% of our kids with a full Regents diploma in 4 years.
That's outstanding. That is
Yeah.
that is something to be proud of. So well done.
And for $8,000 a year.
Yeah.
And
Now,
of course, the city is spending $25,000 a year per kid, and Johnny can't read.
Exactly. Now, when you left the teaching and came down here after basically running unsuccessfully against AOC, but I would say somewhat successful because you were a tremendous fundraiser. And I may be wrong on the numbers, but you raised something like $12 million, which is, wow, that's ballpark big. So what were and I'm gonna let you share this if you wish, but kind of tell a little bit about what happened when you got here in 2021, because as we all know, our old Congressman Tom Rice was Trump was looking to unseat him. So I don't know if you want to share that story or not.
Yeah, we were extremely successful when it came to fundraising, and of course we had to do so many different things. We had to be creative to try to get the word out because of the lockdowns.
Sure.
And I'm not blind to the fact that a lot of the fundraising success we had was because of who I was running against. As
Right.
you said, she's considered evil by a lot of people.
Mm-hmm. Well, she's sort of the top target of the liberal progressives, if you will.
Right.
What they call them, the squad.
Right. So we had probably for most of the campaign, we had 4 people.
Wow.
And it became a nationwide campaign.
Yes.
We did raise $12 million.
That's phenomenal.
But it was from all 50 states.
Right.
And the average donation was $42.
Wow.
So it wasn't any big money.
That's grassroots. Yeah.
We didn't take any PAC money.
Yeah.
I shouldn't say that. We took PAC money from one PAC, and it was Mike Huckabee's pro-life PAC.
Yeah. Hey.
That was it.
Yeah.
We didn't take any other PAC money. And it was very successful. We had no help from the RNC. We had no help from the congressional committee either, the NRCC.
Yeah.
We met with them a few times, but they thought that we had no shot of winning, so they just didn't help us out. And I don't think they were real happy that we raised that much money because they wanted to know how we did it. And it's like, hey, look, we pushed the right buttons.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a great group of people working with me. So when I got here in February 2021, I was here 2 days.
Right.
And my phone rings, and it's somebody from in and around the Trump campaign.
Wow.
Said, hey, John, you live in South Carolina? In Tom Rice's district? I was like, yeah, I didn't unpack my bags yet, but yeah, I'm here.
Yeah.
And they said, you want to run against Tom Rice? I'm like, guys, I didn't even pick up my mail yet.
Hey, they were looking to knock him out. And I'm not even sure. I know the only person I can confidently say who had entered into the race at that time was Ken Richardson. I'm
Right.
not sure that there was anybody else who had announced. I don't even think Russell was in the race at that time. So, yeah.
So we did some polling just to see what it was like.
Yeah.
And people weren't really that concerned about the whole carpetbagger thing because so many of the people that are here are not from here.
Correct.
So that wasn't an issue. But I told them, look, let me feel my way around first. So for the next 6 months or so, maybe a little more, kept my campaign active, obviously the same people. But as I made my way around, I couldn't get a good read on what was going on here. It took me a while.
Yeah.
And I'm sure everybody knows why.
Yes.
But I decided not to do it. And then I was thinking about running locally.
Yeah.
For my local House seat at the state level.
Which that was Russell Fry's old seat.
That was
correct?
Russell's seat.
So District 106. Yeah.
So I thought about that too, and there was a couple of things. Like I said, my wife's health was an issue, and I said, you know what? Let's just wait.
Sure.
So
sure. Well, yeah, John. So I know you and I met because at the time you moved down, I was the president of Horry County Republican Women, and I had received a list from the state party of new movers, and so you were in that list, your name and address. So I reached out to folks by writing some handwritten notes. And I think the first time we actually met face to face was at the first in the South CPAC, some kind of event that the SCGOP had put on here at Myrtle Beach. And you came up to me, you actually had the card in your hand and said, hey, you wrote me this. And I was like, hey, this is awesome. So, and then from there, we've obviously grown closer and closer as friends. And your wife and I, we've all sat and talked. My history is not that different from yours in terms of what I've done. Obviously, I am a native of South Carolina, thus the Southern accent. I'm from upper state, so from York County. I went to Clover High School, played sports there, got recruited by Jess Danley a little over 30 years ago, came here, played, softball and volleyball at Coastal Carolina, and then subsequently became a teacher myself. And I also taught AP US History. I taught AP Economics, AP Government, micro and macroeconomics, and it's world history. As you said, sometimes teachers leave, you get stuck. I've even taught pre-algebra. Became an administrator.
No, I couldn't have done that.
Yeah. So,
yeah,
it was just a plethora of different opportunities made themselves available to me. So I had a great experience as a teacher. Now I married an Army guy because I was working overseas as a Christian missionary teaching. And that's where I met my husband. He was stationed in South Korea at Yongsan. We got married. We have a teenage boy now, and he retired in 15. I retired in 18. I kept saying 17, but I retired in 18. I went back, looked at my record. I was like, yeah, Shannon, you retired in 18. And so came back here to South Carolina. He had gotten a position working with the government out there, and so he transferred anyway here within the GS system. So now we're back in South Carolina because we both agreed retirement goes a lot further in a state like South Carolina than it does in a state like Hawaii, where everything's expensive because it's pretty much brought in to the state on a big boat. So very similar background. I as well had some law enforcement background back when I got out of the Navy. I went back to school to get my certification to teach. And while I was doing that, I worked for the Sheriff's Department, Spartanburg County. So very familiar with the areas that you're familiar with in terms of law enforcement. Didn't have the number of years that you had. Went pretty much into teaching shortly thereafter. But yeah, so it was really interesting that we have such an interesting parallel in terms of what we've done in our lives. And so I thought, what a great opportunity for us to sit down and talk about local politics, because it's really not done. Everything you look at, there are literally hundreds of podcasts, great ones. Dan Bongino, Ben Shapiro, even on a more local level, you got Chad Caton with I'm Fired Up. You got Tracy Beans Diaz with Uncover DC. A lot of different organizations, groups cover the national scene. So I think that's done fairly well. But you and I kind of talked about the fact that there's not a lot of discussion about local politics, and local as in Horry County, and local as in just the state in general. And so a number of people don't even know who their representative is in terms of their state. And in some cases, they don't know who their federal representative is either. And that's sad. So I was very happy when you agreed to come on and kind of join me in this. And so you and I have set out to do this, and I'm excited about that opportunity. And I think, once people get to watching the podcast and sharing with their friends, it will pick up some following because people want to know what's going on. And I think as we lay out facts, now this is not our opinion, we're going to give you factual evidence that you can look up and verify yourself. Once we start sharing this, I hope that this leads to a real conservative revival, if you will, because one of the things you and I talked about is we were looking at CPAC, and that is the Conservative Political Action Committee, for those that don't know what CPAC stands for. And it is a system that scores both federal representatives and senators as well as your state, your local guys. So when we took a look at just the state, I'll kind of give some numbers here for folks to know. In 2014, we were looking at the Senate here in South Carolina, and it was, predominantly GOP at that time. We didn't have a supermajority, but we had a significant majority. And the ranking by CPAC in 2014 was nearly 77%. It was 76.6%. So that's pretty good. Not genuinely conservative, because I think you and I agreed that 80%, 80 to 100 is you're conservative, 79 to 60 is what we would call a moderate, and 59 to 40 you're liberal, and if you're under 40 you're just a Democrat. I mean, would you agree?
Yeah, pretty much. I think that's exactly the way it goes. At least you want it to be reflective of the people that live in the district and in the area. So if if you're up around 80 in an area like this, I think you're pretty close.
Right. So, again, so we looked at 2014, Senate GOP by CPAC scoring was at, as I said, 77%. And then just 2 years later, in 1 year later, rather, 2015, that tanked down to 40% conservative. And then in 16, it dropped further to 39%. And then in 17, it dropped all the way to 26%. So one of the things that we wanted to do, and I haven't had a chance to do it yet, is we want to take a look and see, well, who was elected in 14 that kind of tanked that, or who was elected in 16 that tanked it further. I mean, to go from 77% to 26% in 3 years is pretty damning. And I think I have some strong suspicions as to who that was. And I'll let you talk a little bit about our Horry County delegation, who makes up that delegation. And that's what folks here need to know. We do have mostly Republicans in the Horry County delegation, but there are a handful of Democrats in our delegation as well. So I know you and I sat down and we took a look at the CPAC scoring again. And so we just ranked them. Again, this is not you and I doing this. This is the conservative PAC did this. And they ranked each of our representatives in terms of their voting record as to how conservative that voting record was considered. So who did we find was the number one, if you will, conservative, or the most conservative Horry delegation member that we have?
So at the top is Tim McGinnis at 63%.
63%. Now, again, folks, you go back, we said 80% or better is conservative. 79 to 60 is moderate. So the top guy in our delegation is at 63%. So I don't know, John, what is that again?
Yeah, at 63%. And the average of the 8, and it's only 8 because we have 2 new people in, so we have no voting record.
Correct.
The average amongst all of them against the 8 is 55%.
Yeah, so that is not good.
Not acceptable.
No,
I don't think.
It's not. Yeah. So, but I'll kind of go through the list. So at the top, Tim McGinnis, and he is in District 56, for those of you who want to know what district he represents. Then second behind him is William Bailey. He is in District 104, and he has 61%. And folks, after that, it goes downhill pretty rapidly.
It's not pretty.
It is not pretty. So then in third place, Jeff Johnson from District 58 is at 58%. And then we have Case Britton from District 107. Now, he's also at 58%, but the reason why I put Johnson above him is because in 2021, CPAC that year ranked Jeff Johnson at 63%. So the scores that we're using is a lifetime, what they've done as their time in office, cumulative. So 58% was a tie between Jeff and Case Britton, but Jeff wins out with 63% in 2021. And then we go to number 5, which is Heather Ammons Crawford. She was my former representative from District 68, but with the new lines being drawn, it's now Carla Schusler, who, as you noted, does not have a voting record. And she was tied at 56% with Kevin Hardy, but I gave her the nudge on that because in 2021, she had a really great voting record. I'm going to give credit where credit is due, 81%. Now, that is a conservative voting record. So if she could maintain that 81% voting record, my hat's off to her, because she would certainly surpass the top of the ticket right now in terms of folks in the delegation being conservative. So I hope that continues. We'll see how the 2020 cycle went. We haven't had an opportunity to get those scores sent to us yet. So she's at 81% in 2021, and Kevin was at 55%. So obviously she gets the nudge and goes to the 5 slot. And then we have number 7 is Stephen Goldfinch, representing District 34. He is at 54%. And then Greg Hembry from District 28. Senator Hembry is at 45%. And then we have a Democrat, Mr. Lucas Atkinson from District 57, who is at 43%. And then we have Democrat Jackie Hayes in 10th place at 35%. Now, folks, here's the next name, which is a shocker. And I'm gonna let John say this gentleman's name. He's a state senator, and he has been beaten. He's a Republican. Now, these other two guys are Democrats. So here's a Republican. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, it's Luke Rankin, and he's at 34%. And I think the thing that's most disturbing about that is, how does that reflect the people that are in this district? No matter what you think about conservative values or conservative ratings or whatever, does that line up with the people in this district?
Yeah, I question that. Now, a little bit of history on Mr. Rankin is he was a Democrat. He ran as a Democrat, was defeated as a Democrat, and then switched to the Republican Party. And I refer to him as what I like to call now the Crystal Matthews candidate. For those of you not familiar with who Crystal Matthews is, she is a former South Carolina representative who actually tried to run for Senate against Tim Scott, was handily defeated. But most important about her, she made national news because she was on a phone call with a prisoner, and those calls are all recorded, so you think she would have known, or maybe she did know, just didn't care. But in that phone conversation, she is recorded as saying that here in South Carolina, we need to have more imposter candidates. And she went on to clarify that to mean that Democrats needed to say they were Republican, then get elected, and then vote as a Democrat. So I believe that Luke Rankin is a classic example of those imposter candidates that Crystal Matthews described, where he was a Democrat, is a Democrat, switched and said he was a Republican, and now he's voting as a Democrat. Now, some folks call those, what's the big word we always hear? Rhinos. Republican in name only. Well, I think that term has become so overused that we need to just, I don't want to use it anymore. So I'm just going to call them imposter candidates. So he is a Republican imposter. He's really a Democrat. And the scores prove it out. So he's from District 33, and that was my district until they redo the lines. And now he is no longer my senator. It is Greg Hembry. Excuse me. I take that back to Stephen Goldfinch. And I believe Stephen is also your senator. Is that correct? Your state senator?
Yeah, he is. Yeah.
So Luke Rankin is someone that we really want to see. Either he gets his conservative voting record up or his time is up. He is up for re-election in 2024. And so I'm going to strongly advocate for a true Republican to run against him and oust him from that position, because there are just a number of concerns I have with Mr. Rankin that we'll talk about as we get into this first podcast. But then after Luke Rankin, who is in 11th place, again, two actual named Democrats have more conservative voting records than this alleged Republican. We then have Democrat Kent Williams from District 30 at 25%. And Carl Anderson, a Democrat at District 103, he is at 18%. And rounding out the bottom is Ronnie Saab, who is also a Democrat, District 32 at 17%. Now, as you noted, we have 16 members, but Val Guest, who replaced Russell Fry in District 106, doesn't have a voting record. And Carla Schusler, who was elected to represent the new District 61, of which I am president, also has no voting record. So it will be interesting to see over the coming weeks and months how this legislature body moves forward in terms of voting conservative. So what would you like? Anything you want to add to that, John?
Well, neither of the two newbies,
Yeah.
Val Guest and Carla Schusler, neither of them joined the Freedom Caucus.
Oh, that's telling.
So that's an interesting point. I mean, maybe a little hesitant to tip their hand early. I'll give them the benefit of the doubt on that. But when you look at that entire group, none of them are in the Freedom Caucus.
In fact, the Freedom Caucus, there's no one from the delegation in that.
Yeah.
And they wanted to have someone in this area because we are one of the largest districts for South Carolina, and they don't have a single representative here who is a true conservative. As we noted, the top person was Tim McGinnis, who was a moderate with 63%. So we have work to do. I am from York County originally, and just to give you an example, one of our guys is in the 96 to 97% ranking in terms of conservative voting, and used to have Mick Mulvaney, who famously went on to be the CDO for Trump, and then became his chief
of staff.
Yeah, chief of staff. So he had a 97% conservative voting record while he was in Congress. So we have some real conservatives from that area, and I hope that we can have some of those folks or some of the folks here start emulating the Freedom Caucus and some of those votes. Speaking of the Freedom Caucus, there was some real concern that even made it to folks like Glenn Beck and I think Dan Bongino talked about it. I know Ralph Norman, who was the congressional congressman from my old district and out there in New York, they noted something very suspicious happened with our Republican caucus here in South Carolina. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, it's this idea of a loyalty oath, which just that term should send shivers up your spine.
Absolutely.
Loyalty oaths have no place in representative government.
No, that's
if you want
hello,
to
comrade.
pledge allegiance to the country, that's great.
Yeah.
But a loyalty oath, especially one that dictates that people don't speak about what goes on in meetings of a representative government, it kind of flies in the face of having a representative government. And the fact that that even came up, I think, tells you a lot about what's going on in Columbia.
Yes. Now, again, there were 20 members of the Freedom Caucus. I believe several of them actually did go on and sign that as well. There were, I know, 2 members who signed on to that oath. So tell us a little bit, what are the 2 major sticking points, if you will, within that loyalty oath that appear to be problematic to anyone who cares about liberty and freedom?
I guess the best way to explain it is to read it.
Okay.
So if I may take a little time here. Rules of the South Carolina House Republican Caucus. This is number 15. In order to encourage and foster candid, open, and frank communications and discourse between and among members, all discussions and communications between and among members during any caucus meeting or event shall be strictly confidential and shall not be disclosed or divulged to third parties in any way or method whatsoever. In furtherance of this strict confidentiality rule, that's another phrase that you shouldn't say, strict confidentiality rule, each member shall be required to acknowledge and certify his or her receipt, review, and agreement to adhere, abide by, and comply with the caucus rules specifically, including strict confidentiality. So basically what that means is that anything we talk about, you can't go back to your constituents and discuss.
Well, that's transparent. That's as clear as mud, as we say in the South.
Flies in the face of transparency and representative government. And then the next entry, number 16, members shall treat all caucus members in a respectful manner with proper decorum at caucus meetings and events. Okay, I like that. That's fine.
Sure.
The next sentence, no member of the caucus shall engage in campaign activities of any kind against any other caucus member in good standing.
So if I'm understanding that, what that means is if, for example, let's say I were a member of the House and I am not approving of Luke Rankin's voting record, being that it's lower than 2 other Democrats, and I find someone else who is more conservative, say a John Gallman, throw out a name there, and I want to get behind that individual or yourself and get behind you guys to have you fill what is obviously a need in terms of being a true conservative, I would be penalized or prohibited from doing that and would have to either abstain from endorsing anybody, or I would have to endorse Luke Rankin, even though he had, am I missing something?
That's exactly what it says. And I wonder if they would refund your admittance fee to join the club.
Yeah, but speaking of that, how much is that? What do these guys have to pay to be a member of the Republican caucus?
I think it was $500
Yes.
for caucus dues, unless you're a lifetime member, which is $5,000.
Oh, $5,000. So you can pay your way into the club. I love this. That's fantastic. Just, you can pay your way in. So, and I do understand that there were a couple of members of the Freedom Caucus, or at least one member who is a lifetime member. So he could not be blocked, even though he refused to sign, because he is a lifetime member. Now, it's been explained that these rules were really patterned after the same rules that were presented at our second convention, if you will, of the South Carolina Republican Party that was held this past, was it July? I think it was July that we had that second, because the first one was sort of spread out because of COVID. So we had another one, and in that one we passed some rules that are similar in nature. So, and we could certainly talk about the problems within our SCGOP at a later date. But So yeah, I find that very problematic, and I believe that Ralph Norman actually took to the interwebs, if you will, to post his disdain for that, and said that, look, that doesn't represent democracy. The idea that you're going to tell people they have to swear an oath of allegiance to support incumbents. That is exactly what we don't want to have. And our founders, you and I both taught history, our founders believed that the congressmen, the representatives, were supposed to only serve for a limited amount of time. And then what were they supposed to do, John?
Yeah, head back to home. Well, Congress only met 5 months out of the year in the beginning.
Right.
So they didn't even think to pass laws that said, okay, we're going to limit the terms, because it was such an inconvenience to serve. I mean, you really had to be dedicated to the country to serve, because you had to stop your life. You had to go to what became Washington, D.C.
Right.
And serve, and you'd be going back and forth. You put your business on hold, you put your law firm on hold, your farm, whatever.
Yep.
You got to stop doing what you're doing and serve.
Yep.
And there was really no money to be made. Matter of fact, they got paid per diem in the House and the Senate in Washington, D.C. They got paid per diem. So nobody was going to do that for a long time.
Right.
Now, it's a moneymaker.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I remember when, speaking of Ocasio-Cortez, your opponent, I remember when she first was elected, her big argument was that she didn't get paid enough, that she couldn't afford to live in Washington, D.C. They needed to increase the salary. And in her second term, she went from being this poor, former bartender who didn't understand how in the world she was supposed to be able to pay for an apartment or whatever to live in D.C. while she was serving, to she owns a Tesla. Now, those are very inexpensive, right? They're what, a couple $1,000. Come on, she bought a Tesla. Now, there are some things that are being put forward in the House. I think there was a bill that's been presented called the Pelosi Act, which is going to prevent members of Congress from benefiting from insider trader knowledge about various things that they can then invest in and gain money in. So it's been a moneymaker once you get elected to Congress. I don't know a single person who has gone into, whether it's the Congress or the Senate, who left either in the same financial condition or worse. Do you know anybody?
And I think it's probably harder for the average representative from the West Coast to budget all their money and get housing. And I mean, the congressman up in New York, not to go back to her all the time, you just jump on Amtrak and you're home.
Boom.
If you're a representative from
Oregon, you do like Biden, you take the Amtrak. Yeah, actually,
right, you go take the Amtrak.
You and Corn Pop.
Sit with the conductor and the engineer. But, that's an easy one. You're home in 3 hours.
Right.
If you live in Oregon, you pretty much have to get a steady place to live. And that's why so many of the representatives actually move their families to the greater Washington, D.C. area. And I understand that.
Yeah.
You can't ask people to leave their families for 11 months out of the year.
Right.
So they actually just proposed some legislation to allow them, members of Congress, to write off a second residence on their taxes, a second mortgage, so they can have 2 places to live.
On the one hand, I agree with you. I think that, missing your family for that period of time is certainly not something I support, especially when you have young children. Like our Russell Fry, our congressman, has a young child. I think James is 6. And so I wouldn't want him to miss out on that time with his child or his wife. But I have often thought, because I was in the military and my husband was retired Army, that maybe we need to have something akin to that. Now, it's not the barracks that you used to see in, Gomer Pyle, where they live in the little domed metal buildings and it's, 50 guys in an area. No, most of them are apartments. And, depending on the number of children you have, if you're a single guy, you get typically a 2-bedroom. If you have one child, you just get the 2-bedroom. If you got 2 kids, you get a 3-bedroom, and it goes on up from there. So I think that it would be worth it for the taxpayers to build those kind of apartments, just basic housing, that would then allow those individuals who have to be, traveling great distances. And I agree with you. Anybody that's close within a 3-hour, maybe even a 4-hour range, you don't get that. You don't get that opportunity, because you can get back and forth relatively quickly. And instead of them having to have another mortgage, they basically get to stay there, and that's a part of their benefits package, if you will. That's what I'd like to see, because I think that would be a better alternative than giving them some kind of break on their next palace that they're gonna purchase.
Or we could just go back to 5 months a year.
Hey, I'm for that too. I didn't even say 6 months. Let's give them 6 months.
Yeah.
We don't need them up there because the longer they're in DC, the more crap they put on the American people. And I personally have had enough. So kind of going back real quickly with the oath of the caucus Republicans oath, I hope that gets defeated soundly in the next session that we have. This session is too late. Obviously, they've already put it in place, but this is going to require you and I and the other voters across the state, not just in Horry County, but across the state, to put pressure on your elected representatives, because right now they don't feel any pressure. I think they've really never had direct contact with their voters beyond when they go out to campaign. And even then, it's a very select group. I think a great example or a great analogy of how small the Republican Party is in terms of influencing major decisions. We just had the Republican National Convention, committee, just voted in their chair, and it was Ronna McDaniel. Now, there were a lot of us. Again, it was the fourth time, I believe, fourth time.
She said she wasn't going to run too last time.
Right. Well, she didn't really mean that. And she says that again this time. She's not going to run again, so we'll see. But, gosh, if I could spend thousands and millions of dollars on travel and hotels, why not? They held the convention at the Waldorf Astoria in California. California hotels are already expensive, but the Waldorf Astoria, give me a break. It was like $900, $1,000 a night.
Yeah, $1,000 a night.
That's absurd. That's absolutely absurd. But they don't care. They're spending money that they beg you and I to send them. So, but anyway, I digress. I'm going back to how a small group of people tend to elect these representatives. Now, 168 people out of the entire country. We have over 330 million people in this country, and 168 people decided who was going to be the head of the Republican Party. And those are called your national delegates. And, Charlie Kirk went out there and spoke with some of these folks because he said, listen, the people, the grassroots people, the people that you're constantly begging for money. I don't know about you, John. How often do you get emails saying, send us money, send us money?
I think because I ran for office, I'm on every list.
Yeah, me too.
So I just get bombarded with stuff. And I am a man of meager means.
Yeah. Well, I didn't run for nearly the level of office you did. I ran for county council, but kind of in the same boat as you. I get just inundated with give me money. And I have long ago made the determination that the only way I was sending any money was directly to a specific candidate. I don't support the RNC financially. I did for a time support the SCGOP. I would send them, the largest amount that they ask you to send. I don't do that anymore. I'm done sending them. They won't get a penny from me because I'm just appalled at the lack of democratic process that I see going on there. A lot of bullying and things of that nature that have taken place. And to that end, one of the things I wanted to talk about today was something else in our state that I find is problematic, and that is our judicial system. Now, some states, I don't know, how does New York determine who gets to serve as a judge or magistrate in New York?
It's by election. I think South Carolina is one of two states that don't elect judges.
Right.
They're appointed by the legislature.
Correct.
In New York, it's when we go into, sometimes when you go in and vote up there would be a list of judges. There'd be like 10, 15 judges going on, local, circuit court, district court, city court. There's so many, government is so expansive up there. Mm-hmm. So we vote up there. Yeah.
And I think that's what needs to happen here in South Carolina, because right now, everybody buckle up here, because the guy who is actually less conservative than two Democrats is the chairman of the Judicial Committee who determines who becomes judges here in Horry County. And that's Luke Rankin. Senator Luke Rankin gets to decide that. And I'm going to give you an example of someone that he put on the bench and then put back on the bench. And this guy's name is Brad Meyer, and he is a magistrate judge. And this gentleman was arrested for driving drunk, DUI, driving the wrong way on the road. And I certainly think that if you're going to be a person who represents the law and you're going to actually adjudicate cases that come before you, you need to be an upstanding citizen. And I don't think someone who is guilty of driving while drunk and potentially, endangering the lives of citizens of Horry County ought to be making determinations of anything in a judicial setting. But he was charged with that. and Mr. Luke Rankin looked the other way and put him back on the bench to be a magistrate here in Horry County. Not only did he do that, but this guy, he made a determination recently in the Horry County GOP in which he said that the leadership of the Horry GOP was actually Reese Boyd, an attorney here in South Carolina, who claims that he is the duly elected county chair of the party. But there's multiple problems with this. And one of those problems is in the court case, Reese Boyd and Jerry McDaniels, who is a political activist here in Horry County, stood up and lied in court. They said that at their meeting, when they held their election, that there were 2/3 of ECs present. Now, that's what's required in order to actually hold a vote for leadership. But we actually have video of the event in which it can be proven, indisputably proven, that they only had a simple majority, 50+1. But both of these individuals stood up in the courtroom and lied and said that they had 2/3. Now, we had someone from our side said, listen, we've got video to prove that's not true. We have them on video at the vote. And Reese Boyd even said, well, it's ambiguous as to whether you need 2/3. So we think that a simple majority is enough, and we're going to move forward with the vote. We have him on video saying that. And we attempted to present that video with the Judge Brad, and he refused to allow us to put that video in because he said it needed to be presented by the person who did the video. So we called that gentleman and had him hurry there to the case while it was being adjudicated. He got there in time, and he was denied the opportunity to show his evidence. And so they ruled in favor of Reese Boyd, largely because they sent someone from the SCGOP to speak on his behalf. Now, I was told that the SCGOP, Drew McKissick, said, yeah, these guys are these are the elected leadership, and that's who we're gonna work with at the state. Well, the last time I checked the rules, the party chair in the county is not determined by the state chair. It is determined by the elected executive committeemen and committee women. And those individuals voted Roger Schlegel into office, and they're the only ones that can remove him. And since there was never a vote taken to accept any resignation or to move to replace him, he is still the lawfully elected party chair for Horry County. But anyway, I just want to go back to the fact that Luke Rankin put this guy back on the bench. And might I mention that he's not even a licensed attorney. He never even passed the bar. He's just some Joe Schmo off the street. Now, I know that happens in other states too. You get folks that run. I have a friend who is actually a retired colonel in the Army, and he's a magistrate, but he was elected out in New Mexico. Now, this guy has a lot more experience adjudicating cases, if you will, because of his position as a colonel. He understands what it is to follow rules, follow the UCMJ, and then to issue punishment appropriately. So I feel like he has that experience that is necessary. He's obviously a college graduate, and you don't become a colonel in the military if you're not well acknowledged of the law. So I would like to see that change happen. I'd like to see it go to where it is an elected process. Now, I know that Governor McMaster's wants to take over that role himself. So what do you think about having the governor select our judges?
I think that anytime you have a system where the people aren't involved, and you have the system that you have right now in the legislature picks, there's an appearance of impropriety. Whether it's legitimate or not, it still doesn't look good.
Right.
If we, the people, say these are the people we want judging these specific cases, if it doesn't go their way, they say, well, you know what? We can go out and campaign against this guy. We don't like the way he's making decisions.
Right.
But to have these people continually appointed, selected
Right.
by a group of people in Columbia, many of whom are lawyers, that when they're not in session, return to their practice and try cases in front of said judge who they appointed.
Yeah.
There is
there's no conflict there.
Right. But just the appearance, you just want to avoid that at all costs. It just creates a mess. And I think the fact that it's only 2 states out of 50 kind of shows you that you're a little late to the party.
Yeah, I would agree with you. And in fact, I should mention that the attorney that represented at Horry County GOP actually was the attorney who defended the judge in his DUI case, Von Herman. So I'm sure there was nothing going on there that was inappropriate whatsoever. And in addition to that, there are rumors. Now, I can't substantiate this, so I want to clarify these are just rumors, but there are rumors that there are all kinds of backdoor deals made for various individuals who want to become judges. It's a very lucrative position. They get paid pretty well, certainly better than you do to be an elected official. And some of these guys will actually go out and work with Democratic caucus members and say, listen, right now we have the majority, we're in control, but if you can get your constituents to vote for me, I'll make sure you get put on a judgeship. Now, here's the problem with that. If we have Republicans, if you will, who get elected overwhelmingly by the people of Horry County, and they then go and they go and present or place liberals, Democrats into the judicial system, that's a problem, because that does not reflect on what we, the people, want to have happen. If we vote in a Republican, we do it because we want the conservative values that we believe in to be represented in all facets of our lives here in South Carolina. And that certainly does not exclude the judicial system. In fact, I would say that's probably most important. So if you have a situation where members that we elect then get to appoint judges who are anything but conservative, that's a problem. And I think that falls into the area where we see some of these progressive attorneys and prosecutors who are famously supported by men like George Soros. I mean, what do you think about that process?
Yeah, it's just ridiculous. And the two things that surprised me when I came down here was how they got judges on the bench by selection, not election,
right,
and the open primaries.
Yeah.
Those are the two things. I was just stunned.
Yeah. And we fought tooth and nail many times to close our primaries so that we don't have Democrats crossing over and voting in the Republican primaries. Then I remember myself, as I was knocking on doors, there were individuals who said, why are you knocking on my door? I'm a Democrat. And I thought, well, I guess it's because you voted in the Republican primary and then we got your name and address, because they sent us out a list of everybody who votes in the primaries, expecting them to be at minimum an independent, but typically a Republican. So I kind of said, well, if you don't want to have Republicans knocking on your door, then you probably should stop voting in our primaries. I mean, there's that. So we have a lot of issues that we need to deal with here in the state of South Carolina and in Horry County in general. So I think in the upcoming podcast that we're going to be hosting, we're going to be talking about a ton of these concepts. One of those is, and John, I want you to kind of touch on this a little bit before we wrap up here, is the idea that the county council is going to be taking up the proposition of possibly allowing a casino to be put, I think it's in North Myrtle Beach. And I know I have some serious reservations about that, because I just think that you're inviting in organized crime. We already have a problem with human trafficking. I think that's just going to exacerbate that problem. So you had a great idea of something else to do that would be an even better, if you will, cash cow than having a casino. I'd love for you to talk to the folks about that.
Yeah, first of all, I agree with you with the casino. I think it's a bad idea. The element that it attracts is not always the best element. And you also, for all of the money that you may make as the state,
right,
you're also going to have a lot of people locally who might get hooked on the gambling Jones.
Right.
And you just throwing your money in there, and it's too tempting, and it's right there, and it's not a good situation. I've seen it ruin families. Right. I'm sure you have too.
Yeah, absolutely. My
so
sister, her husband, in fact, yeah.
As far as a different project, as someone who has seen this affect a city in Connecticut, it was Bridgeport.
Yeah.
I would think that the construction of a mid-size arena would be a much better idea.
Yeah.
Maybe 9,000 the most. No ice. Ice is too expensive. I love hockey. I played hockey.
Right.
But it's too expensive to maintain. But if you get a 9,000 seat arena right over by the baseball park, and you attract maybe 200 dates a year, and you could do it, that would be great for the area.
Sure.
It creates jobs. It's part-time jobs for people who are retired that are down here. They could work. College people could work. Teenagers could work.
Yeah.
It's a great opportunity because it's part-time, and you can pretty much pick and choose. It's very flexible.
Sure.
But you're bringing in concerts and name concerts. In the summer in particular, when there's a lot more people here, you could really sell some tickets here. You could have the conference basketball championships, NCAA women's regional,
I love
in a 9,000 seat.
I love that.
And you have South Carolina as the 1 seed, and you put them in this bracket, and you're playing in Myrtle Beach. That's sellouts for the first 2 rounds. That's 9,000 people. That's hotels. That's restaurants. That's the sort of thing that you need. It's much more logical than a casino. And I think it would really serve the interest too. You know what? When you have the local high school basketball championships and you play in an arena, that's something that never leaves you as a student.
Oh, absolutely.
It's just an awesome experience. I mean, I've been around college basketball over 30 years. And I mentioned Bridgeport. Bridgeport is a city in Connecticut. It's actually the largest city in Connecticut. And it is truly an urban area. It's very low income, a lot of crime. But the construction of that arena really created a lot of opportunity. I think if it would have been managed better, they would have got a lot more opportunity out of it than they did. But in an area like this, because it's already a destination location,
sure,
I think you could do 200 dates here instead of going to Charleston to see Alice Cooper, who's on tour.
Yeah,
you could come here and see it.
I love it. I think that's a great idea. And I agree with you because my husband and I actually drove to Charleston to see a concert and Stevie Nicks. And, you know, I've driven to Charlotte. We've gone to Tennessee. We've gone to, you know, Texas and other places to see those named bands that you're talking about. And it would be great to have that here. And I agree with you. Having played in the state championship myself, we played it at USC, and that was just, you know, wow.
Oh, it's unbelievable.
Yeah. So I think that having the opportunity to play in a big arena, you're right. That is something that kids never forget. And high school is a short thing. You know, we think it's a long time, but 4 years goes by like that. And so I agree with you.
And it's not just sports. I mean, you have boxing, you have wrestling, you have UFC, you have all of those things. You could have the PBR, right? The bowling, you do all of that stuff.
Gosh, yeah.
But then if you build it near the convention center, you can have large conventions, you can have trade shows, big trade shows.
Right.
So you can have a good 200 dates a year, and that really keeps the economy going.
Right.
Much more so, I think, than gambling. Gambling's a big tease, but you also have to look at that in that casinos are now competing with online gambling.
Yeah. Hey, maybe we can get the RNC to come here. We can get the RNC to come and hold their convention here. That'd be pretty cool and be cheaper. Be a lot cheaper than having it out at the Waldorf Astoria in California. Sure. But hey, I digress. Whatever.
And you could have a pretty big convention. I mean, you're not going to get the national convention here because those usually 20,000 seat. You're not going to go that big.
Yeah.
But I think that the opportunities for a facility like that are limitless, especially when it comes to sports, college sports in particular. Right. I know a lot about conferences and basketball, and what those conference people are looking to do is to find a destination location where they can have their tournament. Sure. So there's other things to do other than just go to the games. Right. And this is the perfect spot.
Yeah. No, I was talking about the RNC vote for leadership. You know, we'd have that here. So less expensive location.
Yeah, not $1,000.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, so folks, that's kind of the wrap up of what we want to talk about today and kind of introduce you to ourselves. And we hope that if you have questions, if you have suggestions, if you have topics you want to talk about, if you have issues that you want us to address, please send us a message and let us know that. You can reach us on email at thepalmettopolitics@gmail.com. That's thepalmettopolitics@gmail.com. Send us your ideas, your suggestions, and we'll certainly talk about them. I know right now I have an aunt and some friends who are fighting vehemently to get some legislation pushed through here in South Carolina to deal with the fentanyl crisis that is invading our border and killing our young people in hundreds and hundreds a day. It is really a sad travesty to see. And so we want to get something in place that can put a stop to that and certainly make it a little more strenuous than what we currently have, where you have somebody who comes in and is caught selling fentanyl and they're released the same day. That is not okay to me, because that, in my opinion, is a weapon of mass destruction. They had a bust in York County in which they collected enough fentanyl to kill every person, man, woman, and child in the state of South Carolina and most of the people in North Carolina. Now, it was enough to kill 15 million people. They're just over 5 million in South Carolina and just over 10 million in North Carolina. So when you take into consideration that a drug could kill that many people, to me, that's a weapon of mass destruction. And we need to approach it a little differently than we do heroin or meth or marijuana, certainly. So, but that's a piece of legislation that's currently before the full House. And I hope that it gets approved. And so that's something that we're working on. And I want to continue to follow that closely. And there are other legislations that are coming forward that we want to talk about. The heartbeat bill was one of those bills that we wanted to follow closely, constitutional carry. So things of that nature are items that are going to be very important to the folks here in South Carolina. And so that's the kind of thing that we want to keep you up to date on so that you know what's going on at the state level, and of course, what's going on to the local level. So we appreciate you guys checking in and watching us, and we hope we'll see you next time. And that's all I got. Anything else, John?
No, it's been a lot of fun. You know, too, if you have an idea for a piece of legislation and you're having trouble reaching your representative, you could certainly send us the information and we'll talk about it right here.
Hey, that's a great idea. All right, folks. Well, that's all I got. This is Palmetto Politics. I'm Shannon Grady.
John Cummings.
All right. And we'll see you guys next time. We're going to be here every Tuesday and Thursday. And we look forward to seeing you guys next time. God bless.